tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Veteran's Return. Joshua Vaughn stood on the porch of his Louisiana mansion, watching the sun bleed crimson across the bayou horizon. At 42, his weathered face bore the scars of 2 tours in Afghanistan and 15 years building the most successful security consulting firm in the Gulf Coast. His steel-gray eyes, once warm with hope, had grown cold and calculating over the years, a transformation his wife Rose Vaughn had failed to notice or perhaps had chosen to ignore. The Vaughn estate sprawled across 300 acres of prime Louisiana real estate, its antebellum architecture a testament to Joshua's rise from a dirt-poor army brat to a millionaire. But tonight, something felt different. The Spanish moss hung heavier in the humid air, and the usual chorus of cicadas seemed muted, as if nature itself sensed the storm brewing. Rose emerged from the house, her auburn hair catching the dying light. At 38, she retained the beauty that had first captivated Joshua 15 years ago, but her green eyes now held secrets that ran deeper than the murky bayou waters surrounding their property. In her arms, she carried 11-year-old Ashley Vaughn, or so Joshua had believed until 3 days ago. "Daddy's home early," Rose said, her voice carrying a false sweetness that made Joshua's jaw clench. "Ashley's been asking for you all day." Joshua knelt as the girl ran to him, her blonde curls bouncing. The DNA test results burned in his jacket pocket like a brand. Ashley wasn't his daughter. She was the product of Rose's affair with Deputy Sheriff Glenn McLean, a fact that had shattered Joshua's world when a private investigator delivered the proof. But Joshua Vaughn was not a man who broke. He was a man who planned. He was a man who waited. And he was a man who never forgot a betrayal. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked Ashley, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. The child smiled up at him with innocent eyes, unaware that her entire world was about to crumble. In her features, Joshua could now see the resemblance to McLean that had been hidden by his own desperate desire to be a father. "I helped Mama plant new flowers by the dock," Ashley chirped. She said they were for something special. Joshua's blood ran cold. The dock was where he'd proposed to Rose 16 years ago. It was also where his security cameras had captured her meeting with McLean 2 nights ago, planning what they thought was Joshua's demise. Rose's hand found his shoulder, her touch now feeling like ice. "I thought we might take the boat out tomorrow," she suggested. "Just the 3 of us. Like old times." Joshua stood slowly, his mind racing through the intercepted phone calls, the secret bank accounts, and the life insurance policy Rose had doubled without his knowledge. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was planning to make herself a widow. "That sounds perfect," he replied, his smile as cold as winter steel. "Just like old times." As they walked back toward the house, Joshua's phone buzzed with a text from his most trusted associate, a former Marine named Oliver Jacobson. Package delivered. Stage 1 complete. The game was already in motion. Chapter 2. Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. The following morning, Joshua sat in his mahogany-paneled office, reviewing security footage on multiple monitors. His company, Vaughn Security Solutions, provided protection services for oil executives, politicians, and anyone else who could afford his premium rates. But today, he was using his resources for a more personal mission. Oliver Jacobson entered without knocking, a privilege earned through 5 years of unwavering loyalty and shared combat experience. The 35-year-old ex-Marine moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his scarred hand steady as he poured himself coffee from Joshua's private reserve. McLean took the bait, Oliver reported, settling into the leather chair across from Joshua's desk. "He thinks he's being recruited for a high-paying security gig in Texas. The job interview is set for tomorrow night at the Old Treem warehouse." Joshua nodded, never taking his eyes off the monitor showing Rose in their bedroom, talking animatedly on her phone. He'd had the house wired months ago during a routine security upgrade, a decision that now proved prescient. "And Rose, still planning your little boat trip," Oliver said grimly. "My contact at the marina confirms she's been asking about the tides and currents. Wants to know the best time for disposal." The words hung in the air like smoke. Joshua had built his fortune on his ability to read people, to anticipate their moves before they made them. Rose's betrayal hadn't surprised him. Her murderous intent had simply confirmed what he'd already suspected about her true nature. "There's more," Oliver continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I traced the insurance policy. Rose has been in contact with someone in the DA's office. They're planning to frame your death as a mob hit, something related to your government contracts." Joshua's laugh was devoid of humor. His wife wasn't just an adulteress and would-be murderer. She was working with corrupt officials to ensure her plan succeeded. The web of betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. "Who in the DA's office?" "Assistant DA Randall Sprague. Turns out he's been taking payments from McLean for years. They got a whole network, judges, cops, prosecutors. They call themselves the Bayou Brotherhood." Joshua stood and walked to his wall safe, retrieving a thick folder marked contingency. Inside were detailed dossiers on every corrupt official in 3 parishes, compiled over years of careful investigation. He'd always known this day might come. "Phase 2 begins tonight," Joshua said, handing Oliver a sealed envelope. "Make sure our friend Judge Barry Ryan receives this evidence of Sprague's corruption. Let them start eating each other alive." As Oliver left, Joshua's phone rang. Rose's voice was honey-sweet. "Darling, I've arranged for Ashley to stay with my sister tomorrow night. I thought we could have some alone time on the boat." "Perfect," Joshua replied. "I'll bring the champagne." After hanging up, he opened his laptop and began typing an encrypted message to his offshore accounts. By tomorrow night, everything would be in motion. Rose wanted to play with fire. She was about to discover that Joshua Vaughn was the Inferno. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. That evening, Joshua sat in his study, reviewing the final details of his plan while Ashley did homework at the coffee table nearby. The innocence on her face made his heart ache. She was a pawn in adult games she couldn't understand. Despite learning she wasn't his biological daughter, Joshua found he still cared for her. She was another victim of Rose and McLean's web of lies. Rose entered, dressed in a black cocktail dress that Joshua now realized was chosen for its ability to hide bloodstains. She kissed his cheek, her lips cold as marble. "I'm eating my book club tonight," she announced. "We're discussing that new thriller about the woman who kills her husband for insurance money." The irony in her voice was unmistakable. "Enjoy your evening," Joshua replied, not looking up from his papers. "I'll be here working on some contracts." After Rose left, Joshua activated a tracking device he'd planted in her car weeks ago. On his computer screen, he watched as her vehicle moved not toward the library where her book club allegedly met, but toward the Rosewood Motel on the outskirts of town, the same place where his cameras had captured her meeting McLean numerous times. His phone buzzed with updates from Oliver. McLean just arrived at the motel. "Sprague is already there. Looks like they're having a planning session." Joshua smiled grimly. Let them plan. While they schemed in that dirty motel room, he was orchestrating their destruction with military precision. "Uncle Josh," Ashley's voice broke through his thoughts. She'd been calling him that since learning about her parentage, a small kindness that touched his hardened heart. "Are you and Mama getting divorced?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Children always sensed more than adults gave them credit for. Joshua closed his laptop and knelt beside her. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart? She's been acting weird, and she keeps making phone calls where she whispers. Plus, she threw away all the pictures of our family trips." Ashley's blue eyes, McLean's eyes, filled with tears. "I don't want you to go away." Joshua pulled her into a gentle embrace, his rage at Rose doubling. It was one thing to betray him, another entirely to traumatize an innocent child with her schemes. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, and meant it. "Your mama and I have some things to work out, but you'll always be safe. I'll make sure of it." As he tucked Ashley into bed an hour later, Joshua's phone lit up with another message from Oliver. "They're on the move. Rose is heading to Sprague's office." McLean went to the sheriff's station. "Something's happening tonight." Joshua checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. Phase 3 would begin at midnight. Returning to his study, he opened a secure video link to 6 different locations around Louisiana. On each screen, former military associates he'd placed in strategic positions over the years gave him silent thumbs-up signals. The network he'd built wasn't for business. It was for war. At 11:30 p.m., Joshua received the call he'd been expecting. "Mr. Vaughn?" The voice belonged to Deputy Mark Reyes, one of the few honest cops left in the parish. "We've had reports of suspicious activity at your property. I'm heading over with backup to check things out." "I appreciate your concern, Deputy," Joshua replied calmly. "But everything's quiet here. Sir, we have reason to believe there may be an attempt on your life tonight. Please stay inside and lock your doors." Joshua smiled as he hung up. The web was tightening, but not around him. By dawn, the Bayou Brotherhood would learn what happened when they threatened Joshua Vaughn's family. Outside, the Louisiana night hummed with the sounds of creatures that knew how to survive in hostile territory. Inside his mansion, surrounded by the trappings of his success, Joshua Vaughn prepared for war. Chapter 4: Blood Brothers. The abandoned Treem warehouse stood like a rusted monument to industrial decay on the outskirts of New Orleans. At 11:45 p.m., Deputy Glenn McLean pulled his cruiser into the shadows, checking his service weapon one final time. The text message had been simple: "Job interview. Come alone. Warehouse 7. McLean was a mountain of a man at 6'4", his linebacker frame barely fitting behind the steering wheel. 15 years on the force had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming danger. But the promise of a six-figure security job in Texas was too tempting to ignore, especially with Rose pushing him to eliminate Joshua sooner rather than later. Inside the warehouse, shadows danced in the moonlight, streaming through broken windows. McLean drew his weapon as footsteps echoed from the darkness. "Deputy McLean?" A voice called out. "I'm Oliver Jacobson, representing the client." McLean relaxed slightly as a figure emerged from the shadows, a lean man in tactical gear with the bearing of a professional soldier. "You're late," McLean said, holstering his weapon. "Traffic," Oliver replied with a cold smile. "Shall we discuss your qualifications?" What happened next took less than 30 seconds. Oliver moved with predatory grace, disarming McLean with a combat technique the deputy had never seen. McLean found himself zip-tied to a metal chair, Oliver standing over him with a tablet showing surveillance footage. "Let's start with your relationship with Rose Vaughn," Oliver said pleasantly. On the screen, McLean watched himself and Rose in passionate embrace at the Rosewood Motel. Then the footage shifted to their conversation planning Joshua's death. Finally, it showed McLean meeting with Assistant DA Randall Sprague to discuss bribes and evidence tampering. "You're making a mistake," McLean growled, testing his restraints. "I'm a cop. People will look for me." "Actually, they won't," Oliver replied, showing McLean another video. This one showed Sheriff Virgil Bruce counting cash while discussing which cases to bury. "Your boss is on our payroll now." Amazing what evidence of corruption can accomplish. McLean's blood ran cold. The Bayou Brotherhood had been his insurance policy. Corrupt officials protecting each other in a web of mutual blackmail. But somehow, Joshua Vaughn had turned their own tactics against them. "What do you want?" McLean asked, his voice hoarse. Oliver pulled up a chair, his expression almost friendly. "Simple. You're going to help us stage a little drama tomorrow night. Your girlfriend thinks she's going to make herself a widow. Instead, you're both going to learn what happens when you threaten Joshua Vaughn's family." As Oliver explained the plan, McLean realized he was trapped in a game where the rules had been written by someone far more dangerous than anyone he'd ever encountered. Joshua Vaughn wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist who'd been planning this revenge for months. Meanwhile, across town, Rose Vaughn sat in Assistant DA Randall Sprague's office, reviewing the final details of their plan. Sprague was a thin, nervous man whose ambition had long ago outstripped his courage. His office walls were covered with commendations and photos with politicians, but his hands shook as he poured whiskey. "The boat will go down in the deep water off Devil's Bayou," Rose explained, her voice clinical. "Glenn will make sure the body is never found. You'll handle the investigation, making sure it gets classified as a mob hit." "And the girl?" Sprague asked. Rose's green eyes turned cold as Arctic ice. "Ashley isn't Joshua's daughter. Once he's dead, I'll have DNA tests done proving McLean is the father." The inheritance goes to my son's father, essentially to me through McLean. Sprague nodded, though something in Rose's tone made him uneasy. There was a ruthlessness in her voice that reminded him why he'd originally been attracted to her, and why he now feared her. The insurance money clears next week, Rose continued. $2 million, plus the estate, plus Joshua's business assets. We'll be set for life. What neither of them knew was that Joshua's security network had been recording every word. In his study, Joshua watched the conversation with the detached interest of a scientist observing lab rats. These people had underestimated him catastrophically. His phone buzzed with a message from Oliver. Package secured. Subject is cooperative. Joshua smiled and typed back. Phase 4 begins at dawn. Chapter 5. The Judas Kiss. Dawn broke gray and humid over the Louisiana bayou, the air thick with the promise of storms. Joshua sat on his porch, drinking coffee and watching the mist rise from the dark water. To any observer, he appeared relaxed, a successful man enjoying a quiet morning. In reality, every nerve was tuned to the deadly symphony he was conducting. Rose emerged from the house, already dressed in white linen that would photograph beautifully for her grieving widow act. She kissed his cheek with lips that felt like a serpent's touch, her perfume unable to mask the scent of betrayal that seemed to emanate from her pores. Beautiful morning for our boat trip, she said, settling into the chair beside him. Perfect conditions, Joshua agreed, watching a great blue heron spear a fish in the shallows. The weather should hold until tonight. Ashley joined them for breakfast, chattering about her upcoming sleepover at her aunt's house. Joshua watched Rose's performance, the loving mother act she'd perfected over the years. It was almost impressive how seamlessly she lied to a child who trusted her completely. After breakfast, Joshua excused himself to handle some business calls. In his study, he opened a secure channel to his network of associates positioned throughout the parish. On multiple screens, he could see Oliver's team maintaining surveillance on key locations. The sheriff's station, the DA's office, the motel where Rose and McLean conducted their affair. Status report, Joshua said into his headset. McLean's playing his part. Oliver's voice crackled through the secure channel. He's convinced Rose that everything's on schedule. She has no idea we've been feeding him lines all morning. And our friend Sprague? Getting nervous. He's made 3 calls to the governor's office this morning, trying to arrange some kind of immunity deal. Seems he's realized he's in over his head. Joshua smiled grimly. Sprague's panic was exactly what he'd expected. The assistant DA was a small-time corrupt official who'd never played in the major leagues of betrayal and murder. Now that he was facing real consequences, his nerve was cracking. Let him sweat, Joshua said. By tonight, none of them will have anywhere to run. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Joshua maintained his facade of normalcy, sharing lunch with Rose and Ashley, discussing trivial matters while his wife planned his murder. Every smile, every casual touch, every loving word from Rose's lips was a knife twist of betrayal. At 3 p.m., Rose's sister Morgan Pratt arrived to collect Ashley. Joshua hugged the girl tightly, breathing in her innocence one last time before everything changed forever. Be good for Aunt Morgan, he whispered. I will, Uncle Josh, Ashley replied, the title she'd adopted since learning the truth about her parentage. Will you come visit me soon? Sooner than you think, Joshua promised. After they left, Rose's demeanor shifted. The loving mother act disappeared, replaced by something colder and more calculating. She moved through the house like a predator scenting blood, checking details and making final preparations. I thought we'd take the big boat tonight, she suggested. The one with the deeper cabin. More private. Joshua nodded, understanding the subtext. She wanted him isolated in the cabin when McLean made his move. Whatever you think is best, darling. As evening approached, Joshua made his final preparations. In his safe, he retrieved a waterproof case containing evidence that would destroy every member of the Bayou Brotherhood. In another compartment, he found the .45 caliber pistol he'd carried through 2 tours in Afghanistan, insurance that tonight would end on his terms. At 7 p.m., His phone buzzed with a final message from Oliver. All pieces in position. The swamp is ready. Joshua pocketed the phone and walked to the dock where Rose waited beside their 30-foot cabin cruiser. The setting sun painted the bayou water the color of blood, and somewhere in the distance, an alligator's eyes reflected the dying light like malevolent stars. "Ready for our romantic evening?" Rose asked, her smile as sharp as a blade. "I've been looking forward to this all day," Joshua replied, and for the first time in hours, he spoke the absolute truth. Chapter 6. Into the Abyss. The Vaughn family's cabin cruiser Sweet Revenge cut through the dark waters of Devil's Bayou like a knife through silk. Rose stood at the bow, her hair streaming in the humid wind, while Joshua piloted from the wheelhouse. To any observer, they appeared to be a wealthy couple enjoying an evening cruise. The reality was far more sinister. Joshua's GPS showed their location with precision, 3 miles from shore, in waters deep enough to hide a body forever. According to the plan Rose thought was unfolding, McLean would emerge from the cabin in 10 minutes, overpower Joshua, and stage an accident that would leave Rose a wealthy widow. What Rose didn't know was that McLean was already aboard, zip-tied in the forward storage compartment with Oliver Jacobson standing guard. The deputy had spent the day thinking he was helping coordinate Joshua's murder. In reality, he'd been fed carefully scripted lines to keep Rose believing her plan was proceeding smoothly. "It's beautiful out here," Rose called over the engine noise. "So peaceful. So private." Joshua reduced speed as they approached the coordinates he'd provided to Oliver earlier. In the distance, he could see the running lights of other boats, vessels that appeared to be random pleasure craft, but were actually manned by his associates. Tonight, Devil's Bayou would have many witnesses to Rose's betrayal. "We should anchor here," Joshua suggested. "I brought champagne." Rose's smile was predatory as she secured the bow line. "Perfect. I'll get the glasses." As she moved toward the cabin, Joshua activated a hidden camera system he'd installed months ago. Every word, every action would be recorded. When this was over, there would be no question about who the real victim was. Rose returned with champagne flutes and a bottle of Dom Perignon, the same vintage they'd drunk on their wedding night. The irony wasn't lost on Joshua as he popped the cork, the sound echoing across the dark water like a gunshot. "To us," Rose said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings. To truth," Joshua countered, clinking his glass against hers. They drank in silence, the bayou around them alive with the sounds of nocturnal predators. Somewhere in the reeds, an alligator's tail slapped the water, and Rose jumped slightly at the sound. "Nervous?" Joshua asked. "Of course not," Rose replied, but her hand trembled as she set down her glass. "Why would I be nervous?" Instead of answering, Joshua pulled out his phone and played a recording of her conversation with Sprague from the previous night. Rose's voice filled the air, clinical and cold, as she discussed his murder and Ashley's parentage. "Glenn will make sure the body is never found," her recorded voice said. "You'll handle the investigation, making sure it gets classified as a mob hit." Rose's face went white as parchment. "Joshua, I can explain." "Can you?" Joshua's voice was as cold as the bayou depths. "Can you explain how you've been planning my murder for months? Can you explain how Ashley isn't my daughter? Can you explain how you've been fucking Deputy McLean in cheap motels while pretending to love me?" Rose's mask finally slipped completely. The loving wife disappeared, replaced by something vicious and desperate. "You don't understand," she snarled. "You're never home. You're always working, always putting that damn business before your family. McLean loves me." "McLean loves your money," Joshua interrupted. "Just like you love mine." Rose lunged for the cabin, probably trying to reach the emergency radio or signal McLean. Instead, she found Oliver Jacobson emerging from the forward compartment, dragging a bound and gagged McLean behind him. "Looking for someone?" Oliver asked pleasantly. McLean's eyes were wild with fear above his gag. Throughout the day, he'd been fed the illusion that he was coordinating with Rose to murder Joshua. Only now did he realize he'd been manipulated into a trap. "This isn't possible," Rose whispered, backing against the rail. "We planned everything perfectly." "You planned it perfectly for amateurs," Joshua said, stepping closer. Unfortunately for you, I'm a professional. The sound of approaching boat engines filled the air. Rose spun around to see 3 vessels closing in from different directions, their spotlights illuminating the sweet Revenge like a stage. On each boat, armed men in tactical gear trained weapons on the cabin cruiser. Your Bayou Brotherhood is finished, Joshua continued. Sheriff Bruce is already in federal custody on corruption charges. Assistant DA Sprague is on his way to a very unpleasant interrogation. And you're about to face justice. Rose's eyes darted between Joshua, Oliver, and the surrounding boats like a trapped animal. You can't do this. I have rights. Rights. Joshua's laugh was devoid of humor. Like the right to murder your husband? Like the right to steal from your own daughter? Like the right to corrupt law enforcement? The radio crackled to life with a familiar voice. This is Agent Lewis Stanley, FBI. We are taking control of this situation. Rose's knees buckled as she realized the scope of Joshua's preparation. This wasn't just about catching her in adultery or theft. He'd orchestrated the destruction of an entire criminal network that had taken years to build. As federal agents boarded the sweet Revenge, Joshua looked out over the dark waters of Devil's Bayou and allowed himself a small smile. The game was far from over, but the first phase of his revenge was complete. Chapter 7. The Judas Trap. 3 hours after the FBI's arrival on Devil's Bayou, Rose Vaughn found herself in an interrogation room at the federal building in New Orleans, her white linen outfit now wrinkled and stained with sweat. Across from her sat Agent Lewis Stanley, a lean man with prematurely gray hair and the patient demeanor of someone who'd broken countless suspects. Mrs. Vaughn, Agent Stanley began, sliding a thick folder across the metal table. We have 17 hours of recorded conversations, 43 photographs of clandestine meetings, bank records showing suspicious transfers, and testimony from Deputy McLean describing your plan to murder your husband. Rose's attorney, a nervous public defender named Philip Story, shifted uncomfortably beside her. He'd been assigned the case 20 minutes ago and was already regretting his career choices. My client wishes to cooperate, Story said hastily. No, Rose snapped, her green eyes flashing with fury. I want to see Joshua. This is all his setup. He manipulated everything. Agent Stanley opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos of Rose and McLean at the Rosewood Motel. Is this manipulation, Mrs. Vaughn? What about these bank withdrawals? He showed her records of Rose moving money to offshore accounts. Or this. The final photo showed Rose purchasing a large boat anchor with cash, clearly intended to weigh down Joshua's body. Rose's composure cracked like thin ice. You don't understand. Joshua is dangerous. He's not the victim here. He's a predator who's been planning this for years. Planning what exactly? Stanley asked. Planning to protect himself from your murder plot? While Rose faced federal interrogation, Joshua Vaughn sat in his private study, watching multiple news feeds covering the overnight arrests of prominent Louisiana officials. Sheriff Virgil Bruce had been taken into custody at 3 a.m., followed by Assistant DA Randall Sprague and 3 parish judges. The corruption network Rose and McLean thought would protect them had become their downfall. Oliver Jacobson entered with a secure phone. It's Ashley, he said simply. Joshua took the call, his voice softening. How are you holding up, sweetheart? Uncle Josh. Ashley's voice was small and frightened. Aunt Morgan says Mama is in trouble. She says Mama and that deputy man were trying to hurt you. The innocent confusion in her voice made Joshua's chest tighten. Ashley was 11 years old and had just learned that her mother was a would-be murderer and her real father was a corrupt cop. No child should carry that burden. It's complicated, Ashley, Joshua said gently. But you're safe now. That's all that matters. Can I still live with you? Even though I'm not really your daughter. Joshua closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the question. Despite everything, despite the DNA tests, despite the betrayal, despite the lies, he realized the answer was simple. You'll always be my daughter, he said. That won't ever change. After the call ended, Oliver studied Joshua's face. You mean that, don't you? About keeping the kid. Rose and McLean created this mess, Joshua replied. Ashley shouldn't pay for their crimes. A knock at the study door interrupted them. Agent Stanley entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. We have confessions from McLean and two of the judges. Sprague is trying to negotiate a plea deal. But Mrs. Vaughn, she's demanding to see you. Joshua considered this. Rose still believed she could manipulate him, still thought her beauty and their shared history gave her power over him. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Arrange it, Joshua said, but I want everything recorded. An hour later, Joshua sat across from Rose in the federal building's secure meeting room. She looked haggard, her makeup smeared and her confidence shattered. But when she saw him, her eyes lit up with desperate hope. Joshua, she breathed, thank God. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them we were just having marriage problems. Were we? Joshua's voice was calm, almost conversational. Is that what you call plotting my murder? Rose's facade cracked again. I was scared. You were so cold, so distant. I thought you were going to leave me with nothing. So you decided to kill me instead. I never wanted to hurt you. Rose's voice rose to near hysteria. McLean said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer. She stopped, realizing she'd just confessed a conspiracy to commit murder on a recorded federal interview. Her attorney buried his face in his hands. Joshua leaned forward, his gray eyes as cold as winter steel. Do you know what I learned in Afghanistan, Rose? I learned that some people are beyond redemption. I learned that mercy shown to predators only encourages them to find new victims. Please, Rose whispered. I'll do anything. I'll confess to everything, take all the blame. Just don't let them destroy me completely. You destroyed yourself, Joshua replied, standing to leave. The moment you chose betrayal over loyalty, murder over marriage, lies over love, you destroyed everything that mattered. As he reached the door, Rose called out desperately, What about Ashley? She needs her mother. Joshua turned back, and Rose saw something in his expression that made her blood freeze. Ashley needs a parent who won't traumatize her with murder plots and lies about her parentage, he said quietly. That's not you, Rose. That will never be you. As federal agents escorted Joshua out, Rose finally understood the scope of her defeat. She'd gambled everything on a plan she thought was foolproof, only to discover she'd been outmaneuvered by a man who understood warfare better than she understood anything. Chapter 8. Devils in the Deep. The Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola sprawled across 18,000 acres of former plantation land like a concrete cancer in the Mississippi Delta. 3 weeks after her arrest, Rose Vaughn walked through its gates in shackles, her federal plea deal having collapsed when additional evidence of her crime surfaced. The prosecutors had discovered she'd been slowly poisoning Joshua with arsenic for months, a detail that elevated her charges from conspiracy to attempted murder in the first degree. Meanwhile, Deputy Glenn McLean found himself in protective custody at a federal facility in Texas, his cooperation earning him a reduced sentence, but not the protection he'd hoped for. Word had leaked that he'd been feeding information to Joshua Vaughn's people, and corrupt law enforcement officers were not popular among any prison population. But the real drama was unfolding in the boardroom of Vaughn Security Solutions, where Joshua sat across from a team of lawyers representing Rose's family. Her sister Morgan Pratt had filed for emergency custody of Ashley, claiming Joshua had no legal right to raise a child who wasn't biologically his. Mr. Vaughn, said the lead attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Grace Lewis. My client is prepared to offer a generous visitation schedule, but Ashley belongs with her blood relatives. Joshua's own attorney, Arturo Eldridge, slid a thick folder across the conference table. Before you continue, counselor, you might want to review these documents. Grace Lewis opened the folder, and her confident expression faltered. Inside were financial records showing that Morgan Pratt had been receiving payments from Rose for years. Payments that came from accounts Rose had been secretly draining from the family business. There were also recordings of Morgan discussing Ashley's inheritance with Rose, conversations that revealed both women had been planning to use the child as a path to Joshua's wealth. Your client, Eldridge continued smoothly, has been part of a conspiracy to defraud my client for the better part of a decade. She's hardly in a position to claim moral authority over child custody. This is preposterous, Grace Lewis sputtered. Morgan Pratt is Ashley's aunt. Morgan Pratt is a co-conspirator who viewed Ashley as a meal ticket, Joshua interrupted, his voice cutting through the legal niceties like a blade. Just like her sister. The lawyers argued for another hour, but the outcome was predetermined. Joshua had spent weeks gathering evidence of the extended conspiracy, documenting how Rose's entire family had been complicit in various schemes to steal from him. By the time the meeting ended, Morgan Pratt was facing her own criminal charges, and Ashley's custody remained with Joshua. That evening, Joshua sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the bayou waters crimson. Ashley was inside, doing homework, her presence a reminder that not everything in his life had been poisoned by betrayal. The past month had been a whirlwind of federal investigations, media coverage, and legal proceedings, but the storm was finally beginning to clear. Oliver Jacobson joined him, carrying 2 beers and the satisfied look of a man who'd seen justice served. Sprague got 15 years, Oliver reported. Sheriff Bruce got 20. Half the parish government is under indictment. And Rose, life without parole. Turns out slowly poisoning your husband while planning his murder doesn't play well with juries. Joshua nodded, feeling no satisfaction in his former wife's fate. Rose had chosen her path, and now she would live with the consequences. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring that predators could no longer harm the innocent. What about McLean? 25 to life. He's been attacked twice in federal custody. Apparently, even hardened criminals have standards when it comes to corrupt cops who hurt children. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ancient dance of predator and prey play out in the bayou waters. A great blue heron stood motionless in the shallows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the distance, an alligator's eyes reflected the dying light like amber jewels. You know, Oliver said eventually, most men would have just gotten a divorce. Joshua's smile was as cold as the depths of Devil's Bayou. Most men don't understand that some betrayals demand total victory. Rose didn't just cheat on me. She tried to destroy everything I'd built, everything I cared about. She used an innocent child as a weapon in her war against me. And now she gets to spend the rest of her life thinking about what she lost. Every day in that concrete cage, she'll remember that she could have been here, could have been part of something real. Instead, she chose to be a predator. Ashley's voice called from inside the house, asking for help with her math homework. Joshua smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. Some battles, he said, standing to go inside, are worth fighting to the end. Chapter 9. Blood Tide Rising. 1 year later, Joshua Vaughn stood in the cemetery where Rose's parents were buried, watching as a small crowd gathered for McLean's funeral. The corrupt deputy had been murdered in federal prison 3 days earlier, stabbed 17 times by fellow inmates who discovered his role in trafficking children through the corrupt network he'd helped operate. Ashley stood beside Joshua, now 12 years old and taller than when this nightmare began. She'd been through extensive therapy, and while the scars would always remain, she was healing. More importantly, she was safe. Do we have to be here? Ashley asked quietly. No, Joshua replied. But sometimes we need to see how stories end. The funeral crowd was pathetically small. A few distant relatives, some former colleagues who attended out of obligation rather than respect. Rose's sister Morgan was notably absent, having been sentenced to 10 years for her role in the conspiracy. The Bayou Brotherhood's network had been thoroughly dismantled, its members either dead, imprisoned, or hiding in exile. Rose herself would not be attending. Life without parole meant exactly that, and Louisiana's Angola prison was not known for its compassionate leave policies. Joshua had received one letter from her in the past year, a rambling, desperate plea for forgiveness that he'd thrown away unopened. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Mr. Vaughn, a voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see a young woman in a dark suit, her badge identifying her as FBI agent Krista Lindsay. Could I have a word? Joshua nodded to Oliver, who moved closer to Ashley as he followed the agent a short distance away. "We've uncovered something you should know about," Lindsay said. "During our investigation of the Bayou Brotherhood, we discovered that Rose and McLean's plans went far beyond just killing you." She handed him a file marked classified. Inside were documents outlining a scheme to traffic children through fake adoption agencies, using corrupt officials to falsify paperwork. Ashley would have been one of the victims, sold to wealthy predators while Rose collected the insurance money from Joshua's death. "My God," Joshua breathed, the full scope of his former wife's evil finally becoming clear. "There's more," Lindsay continued. "Rose has been trying to arrange your murder from prison. She's been corresponding with gang members, offering them information about your security routines in exchange for killing you." Joshua's blood turned to ice. Even behind bars, Rose was still trying to destroy him. Even after losing everything, she remained focused on revenge rather than redemption. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "We're moving her to ADX Florence," Lindsay replied, naming the federal supermax prison in Colorado. 23-hour lockdown, no contact with other prisoners, no possibility of coordinating further crimes. It's as close to burial alive as the legal system allows. Joshua nodded grimly. Rose had chosen to be a monster, and now she would live in a cage designed for monsters. As they walked back toward Ashley, Joshua's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Daddy's justice is coming. Your daughter will pay for our pain." Joshua showed the message to Agent Lindsay, who immediately called for backup. But Joshua wasn't worried. His security network was more sophisticated than ever, and Ashley was protected by layers of surveillance and armed guards that Rose's prison contacts could never penetrate. "Are you scared?" Ashley asked as they walked back to their armored SUV. "No," Joshua replied honestly. "Evil people make threats when they realize they've lost. It's just noise. Will she ever stop trying to hurt us?" Joshua looked down at the girl who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. She deserved honesty, not comfortable lies. "Probably not," he said. "Some people choose to be broken. They choose hatred over healing, revenge over redemption. But that's their choice, not ours." "What's our choice?" Joshua smiled, thinking of the college fund he'd established in Ashley's name, the therapy sessions that were helping her heal, the stable life he was building to replace the chaos Rose had created. "Our choice is to build something better," he said, "to be stronger than the people who tried to destroy us." As their convoy pulled away from the cemetery, Joshua caught sight of Rose's gravestone, a small marker he'd purchased not out of love, but as a reminder. The inscription was simple: Rose Vaughn, 1987 to 2024. She chose poorly. Ashley was reading over his shoulder. "Mama's not dead," she said, confused. "Yes, she is," Joshua replied quietly. "The woman who gave birth to you died the day she chose murder over love. What's left in that prison cell isn't your mother. It's just the echo of someone who used to exist." Ashley considered this with the serious wisdom of a child who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. "Then I guess we don't have to miss her." "No," Joshua agreed. "We don't." As they drove through the Louisiana countryside toward home, Joshua reflected on the past year. Rose had thought she was manipulating him, but she'd actually given him something invaluable: clarity. He now understood that mercy was not the same as weakness, that love was not the same as trust, and that some betrayals were so complete they could only be answered with total victory. The bayou waters reflected the setting sun like molten gold, and somewhere in the distance, new life was beginning its ancient struggle for survival. Joshua Vaughn had faced his demons and emerged victorious. But more importantly, he'd saved an innocent child from becoming another casualty in Rose's war against decency. As Ashley dozed in the seat beside him, Joshua made a silent promise. He would spend the rest of his life ensuring that the predators of the world never again found easy prey in his family. Some battles were worth fighting forever, and this was one of them. The bayou kept its secrets, but Joshua Vaughn's story was no longer one of them. It was a tale written in blood and betrayal, ended with justice and redemption, and ultimately transformed into something Rose could never destroy: a father's love for his daughter and the unbreakable bond that came from surviving hell together. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.